Today, really, I'm going to be talking about cyber resilience, the step beyond cybersecurity. And you've been hearing a lot, certainly according to the agenda today, about how safe the internet isn't. The reality is that cyber threat exists everywhere that you're connected to the internet. You've got folks sitting in nice sunny offshore climes or in downtown Shanghai buildings with the tools, expertise and knowledge to break into and steal information from wherever they want to. Cybercrime is an international challenge. When you look around the world, it's not just from places like China, Russia, Iran, and so on that cybercrime originates. The biggest originator of cybercrime is the United States. So cybercrime is an issue. It's a challenge for organizations anywhere. The only way to genuinely avoid it, as I'm sure you've been hearing today, is to put yourself inside a safe and throw yourself into the sea. You're dealing with a range of attackers, state-level driven attacks, serious organized crime. All major serious organized crime groups have significant cyber capabilities. You've got fraud as a service, you've got phishing, farming, social engineering, hacking the human, and the expertise of cyber attackers gets more and more extended with every passing month. The most skilled cyber attackers are probably working out where vulnerabilities are and selling them to the highest bidder rather than trying to sell them to people who will close them, because the internet is a place which exists beyond law. Primarily for most organizations, it's beyond the jurisdiction for most legal systems. So as an organization connected to the internet, you have a bunch of challenges, and Her Majesty's government in the UK recognized that by putting it into the national security strategy as a tier 1 risk out of 4, and then out of that created a national cybersecurity strategy around the idea of making the UK one of the safest places in the world to do business. The reality is that we're losing. We're just simply not winning that battle to make the place, the world, Britain, let alone Britain, safe and secure. 44 million cyber attacks in 2011, according to the National Audit Office in the UK. The PricewaterhouseCoopers Information Security Breaches Survey identifies that losses to cybercrime keep on going up, and that the average size of a loss for a large organization is between 110 and 250,000 pounds, and that's pretty well in direct costs, because it's very difficult to work out all of the indirect costs, the lost customers, the reputation damage, and all of those kind of things. Verizon's 2012 cybersecurity breaches survey, which is put together with information from all around the world, from secret services, including those in Australia and a number in Europe and so on, identifies the vulnerabilities, the ways in which attacks happen in excruciating detail. 79% of victims were simply opportunistic. There was a vulnerability that an attacker was able to exploit, rather like going into the most dangerous township you can think of in perhaps Rio, one of those favelas, and parking your nice new Mercedes on the street there with the windows all open, the keys in the ignition, and a sat-nav with your home address typed into it, and then walking away and expecting to come back and find your car there. It won't be there. It will be probably outside your house, and your house will have been cleared out of everything. That's rather like what most people think won't happen when they connect to the internet and don't do anything about cybersecurity. So a breach costs a heck of a lot. There's a number of different estimates. The Poneman Institute comes up with a per record cost of $136. For PwC, it can be up to £250,000 or more. But until you've actually had a breach that you recognize and know about and can quantify, it's difficult for you to work out what the cost will be for yourself. And so the question will be that you and your boards should be asking is, what will it cost us? What damage will we suffer? And what's it worth spending to make sure that in the years ahead we don't suffer what organizations like Target, Sony and others have suffered through simple, basic cyber inadequacies? The stakes are high. There's a lot at stake for most organizations. The potential impacts include direct loss, they include financial failure, they include reputation damage. In a number of instances, they include the organization ceasing to exist. And over the last couple of years, there have been 2 or 3 organizations which, through failures to protect themselves, have simply ceased to exist. They've been unable to recover from the size of the cyber attack which has been mounted against them. More and more organizations are looking down their supply chains and saying, chaps, you need to do something that demonstrates that A, you're safe with our data, B, that we can rely on you to be around, and increasingly C, that you're not going to be the source of a cyber attack yourself. Not that we think you might be, but actually it's a lot simpler for a hacker to take over the network and email system of a small organization and use that to mount an attack on you than it is for them to mount an attack directly on you, because an email coming from a trusted supplier is much more likely to be opened and read than something that looks like a phishing email from outside. So increasingly we see organizations looking down their supply chains and saying, come on guys, you need to prove that you know what you're doing around cybersecurity. And so for boards, and I find mostly we're talking about more enlightened boards who recognize that you need skills greater than those that are required to change channels on a TV when it comes to dealing with the internet. Enlightened boards are saying, what do we actually have to do about cyber risk? And you then move into the question of managing or governing, creating a framework within which cyber risk is dealt with intelligently by the organization. And you can draw on an international standard like ISO 38500, which is simply a best practice standard for how boards can go around making sure that the framework within which they deal with ICT, information and communication technologies, is appropriate in the context of their assessment of risk and their appetite for risk, to make sure that they get from their investment in IT what they're looking for. And that simple concept could and should be extended to dealing with cyber risk. So the role of the board is to direct management around what it should be doing strategically, not technically, in terms of dealing with risk, evaluating proposals for how that might be dealt with, and monitoring the effectiveness of the board in doing so. Governance is not management. Governance doesn't stop simply at the level of meeting your corporate governance requirements if you're a listed company. Governance is what boards do when they want to make sure that their executive management are in a position to execute a business plan in a context which is clearly thought through and well understood. So creating a governance framework for managing cyber risk really means you need to deal with 2 particular things. The first is getting the right balance between people, process, and technology. Mostly people think that cybersecurity is a technical thing because we're dealing with technical risk. Therefore, if we've got the right technical controls in place, we're going to be fine. The answer is you're not. Cybersecurity is about getting the right mix between technology, people, and process. At a simplistic level, if you don't have a process which tells you how the firewall should be configured, and someone who knows how to configure it correctly, the fact that you've got the most sophisticated firewall in the world will do you not a jot of good. The other thing you need to do is get the balance right between confidentiality, integrity, and availability when looking at corporate information and corporate assets. Information security in many organizations becomes protecting confidentiality and integrity, and that's usually at the expense of availability. What businesses need is information. Businesses in today's environment thrive on information. They use information to make decisions, to sell things, to build profit, to build customer lines, and so on. And so availability of information, not just to your own people, but to customers, suppliers, and partners is essential. And you've got to find ways of doing that while at the same time protecting confidentiality and integrity. And to do that effectively in most organizations really means that the board has to set some limits to where confidentiality and integrity sits. And that means that you need a framework for information security or cyber security, which is management-driven, not technology-led, which is focused on the needs of the business, and which reflects the business's appetite for risk. And frankly, in all the organizations we've helped with consultancy over the last 10 years or so, not one has adopted exactly the same approach to managing risk as all the others. Risk is what an organization is happy to deal with, and it needs a set of controls that are appropriate for the risk it has, its risk appetite, and of course its legal and compliance obligations. And whichever framework you choose, you should be continually improving. Her Majesty's government bless her, has money to spend. It undertook a survey of information security standards at the back end of last year. By including anything which looked as though it might deal with information security, it found around about 1,000 of them. Most of them are dealing with technical security, security in hardware or in software. There's only a few of them that deal with security in management systems, how management might deal with information security. But the interesting discovery for the government was that the greatest volume of support from industry where standards were concerned was for the ISO 27000 series of standard. And they identified that there was a solid number of organizations who knew what that meant, who had people who understood it, who knew how to take it up, who knew how to deploy the standard, and a level of expertise that could be drawn on. Still not even a majority of organizations, though, dealing with that. So ISO 27000, the recognized standard, the recognized leading standard in the UK and around the world as being simply a collection of best practices turned into a specification for how an organization can manage information security. And the emphasis here is on managing of information security, not on a set of controls. In other words, you choose controls, the things that reduce risk, on the basis of what your appetite for risk is, how you do a risk assessment, how you manage the organization. And that's what ISO 27001 does. It's a set of processes that look at things like how do we plan for information security? What's the role of the board and senior management in providing leadership across the organization where information security is concerned? How do we operate it? How do we do the risk assessment? How do we choose controls? How do we make sure they're working? And ISO 27000 is supported by a number of other standards, all of which provide guidance on specific areas like continuity in ICT operations, in breaches, in risk assessments, and all of those things. So it's a well-developed family of standards that provide supporting advice for organizations who are saying, actually, we need to do cybersecurity, we just don't want to have to reinvent the wheel for ourselves. You can draw on the standards to do that. At the back of ISO 27001 is a list of controls. There are 114 controls that you can select from, but you select from them or anywhere else to suit your requirements on the basis of how you're managing information security. The controls are not where you start. They're the thing you get to and you make selection from when you're looking to put in place how you're going to manage risk. So, cybersecurity, it's primarily about defense. It's primarily about preserving the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets. It's got built into it the idea that there will be incidents, that you need to have some effective method of identifying and responding to information security incidents. And by doing so, goes the ISO 27001 argument, you're able to maintain your posture. The problem is that your defenses are going to be breached. Almost certainly they already have been. If you think they haven't, you're probably not looking close enough. The current state of information security across most organizations, and if I was to say that the average number of the average number of high-level vulnerabilities in the last 6 penetration tests that we carried out for client organizations is 22, it'll give you some idea of why I think that most organizations are already penetrated. The reality of cybercrime is that it's not people picking on you as an organization, they're picking on your vulnerabilities. They look for vulnerabilities because that's the thing they can exploit, and they can find a way of taking advantage of being inside your network once they're in there. Your information is going to be valuable to someone other than you. So the reality is defenses are being breached. What do you do about that? How do you respond, and in what order? And ISO 27001 doesn't provide you that guidance. It doesn't provide you the guidance on how to deal with a breach once it's happened. It doesn't provide you with guidance on how to recover from a disruption of the business. There is a separate area of expertise which does deal with business disruption. It's called business continuity management. And the world of business continuity or disaster recovery management is full of folk who understand the idea of business risk. They understand the idea that there are a whole lot of things that can happen that would disrupt an organization. And they could be terrorist attacks, pandemics, power failures, usually high impact, low frequency events, but events which nevertheless will disrupt the business significantly. In most organizations, the responsibility for business continuity or disaster recovery is held by someone other than the folk who are responsible for information security incident response. There's a link between the two in what we call ICT continuity. The business continuity plan might say, how do we make sure that if there is a flood or a pandemic, the IT systems get up to work again? But there isn't a link in the other direction which says what happens if our IT systems are taken down by a cyber attack such that we lose 3 days worth of work. How does that trigger a business continuity plan? And mostly it doesn't. There is no link in that direction. There is again an international standard, ISO 22301, which again is a specification. It's a set of, this is what you must do, and just in parentheses for those who don't know it, the benefit of a specification is that you can have someone carry out an audit against it. And that means that you can get a certificate from a third party which says they're doing this thing really well. They're doing what it says. Most people don't implement ISO 27001 or ISO 22301 for the certificate. They implement it because it's best practice, because it saves having to work it out for yourself. It's a fast way to get to something that approximates a starting point. So, business continuity experience, really strong around acts of nature, business disruption, external events, very little understanding of the technical issues. Maybe know what backups should be, maybe know a little bit about how a disaster recovery site should work. We've got one of them, it's probably 10 minutes down the road, which is not a lot of good if the entire power system is taken out in the area. They know how to test continuity plans. Continuity is about making sure that a core business process is got back up and running within the time scale that it needs to make sure customers are happy. And for a business continuity expert, the process starts with what's called a business impact analysis. What's the impact on the organization if this key process is disrupted? And they're therefore trained and expert in identifying what a core business process is, what the key risks are, what the disruption might look like. They know how to recognize an escalation path from a small incident, minor flooding, but the weather forecast is that it's going to continue raining for the next 15 days, and we're on the Somerset levels, so maybe we're going to get a little bit inundated with water. They know how that stuff works, but they don't have any expertise in what the escalation path is from a combination of a social engineering attack across 7 of your sites with an escalation in malware attacks going on across all of your internet access points. But they do know how to understand, they do know how to work out what the maximum acceptable outage for a process is, how long can you live with that process not operating, how quickly does it have to be back up for the customers to not be lost. They know how to do that stuff. So the challenge for organization becomes, how do we combine the two? The business continuity world for some time has been talking about the idea of business resilience, and the concept of resilience is simply the ability to adapt rapidly, to soak up punishment, to cope with it, and to keep going. That's what resilience is about. And for probably the last 7 or 8 years, the business continuity world has been talking, not massively, but in the more sharp-minded parts of it, about the idea of business resilience. It's no good just having business continuity plans, because some of the things that will happen are not predictable. Some of the things that will happen you need to be able to respond to quickly, and that means the organization has to be resilient. And so business resilience has come to be defined as the ability to rapidly adapt, to protect business assets, respond to business disruptions, and get business operations back up and operating as normal within an agreed planned time frame. When you put the two ideas together, you get what we call cyber resilience. Cyber resilience being the ability to recognize links between cyber and physical issues, to work out where the escalation points are between them, and to react to and respond rapidly to cyber incidents as well, protect yourself against attacks while responding to the range of disruptions that cyber attacks cause. The key issues, though, in creating a cyber resilience framework, and let me promise you, it's not a very simple and easy thing to do. You don't go in tomorrow and say, cyber resilience, that's what we need, and everybody goes, yay, been waiting for you to do this. The challenge is, how do we coordinate skills which are often highly technical in nature, because we know how to deal with all of the issues that come in through the digital realm, and how do we integrate that with folk who are very good at dealing with threats on our back doors where we have equipment offloaded and being delivered into the organ. We know how to deal with that. How do we integrate the two? Who do we put in charge of an integrated physical digital response? What type of skills do you need for that kind of a role? How do we create a plan which is going to enable us to integrate those? And the starting point is, of course, a strategy. And you'd expect me, I run a consultancy business, our firm, as you know, does everything. We'd be talking about strategy, but you have to have a strategy. You have to have a way of putting together what is it you're trying to achieve and what are the core things that are required to bring it about. You have to have an integrated management system. You can't do cyber resilience on an ad hoc basis. You can't say, let's have a bit of planning, we'll have a few plans around X, Y, and Z and hope it will work, because actually you need to systematically identify where the issues are and put in place methods for dealing with them. You need, above all, an empowered, overriding management structure that puts people in positions where they can make the decisions they need to make to respond to incidents. And that means they also need to be able to create plans, they need to be able to test them, and your planning needs to deal with defense, with continuity, and with recovery as part of a continuum of activity across a range of potential disruptions. And that means you need depth and breadth of staff awareness. It's not just about a few people who understand what is going on. You've been talking through today about things like phishing attacks. Favorite way to break into an organization is a phishing attack, preferably one that's mounted through one of your suppliers. If I get into one of your suppliers and send you an email that comes addressed to a few other people inside the organization, that's come from a Pucker genuine email address, it says, here's the report you wanted from us, click here, you're going to click there. 99 out of 100 times you'll click there, and that will download my piece of malware onto your network, and you're done. So your challenge is, how do you train staff? How do you train staff to manage suppliers? All of that has to be part of an integrated, grown-up cyber resilience strategy. Lots of testing. Mostly testing, firstly, around the perimeter, which is where 80% of breaches could have been prevented through basic cyber hygiene. We talk about a 7-step cyber resilience framework, and the 7 steps are pretty straightforward. It starts with saying, do an integrated business impact analysis and risk assessment. Don't just do one or the other. Tie them together. The standards that you can draw on already make that possible. You just have to go, let's stick them together and make a single management system. Let's look at our processes. Let's look at disruption. Let's look at where the risks are. Then go and fix your cyber perimeter, remembering that mostly the perimeter is mobile, mostly it's somewhere else, maybe in a different country. Maybe fixing the perimeter means thinking about information rights management. Select and apply controls, staff training, test your security plan, and seriously test your recovery capability. As I say, you need to be looking at inputting your perimeter controls in place. You need to be locking down configurations, a whole bunch of security controls that security people will know about. You need to deal with bring your own device. You need to be thinking about the link between incident management and business continuity, which probably means appointing someone to be a security incident response officer. That's the person who should own it and who should understand the escalation process into the business continuity plan. Have to train people. Can't do information security, cyber resilience, whichever words you choose, without people broadly trained, not just core competences, technical competences, but awareness across everybody who's using information. You have to bear in mind that many of the attacks you're going to be dealing with, you don't know what they are. Resilience has to take into account that attackers may have access to information that you don't have. How are you going to respond to them? How are you going to train your security management to be able to respond to that in the context of what are the recovery time objectives you have for your core processes? How do you deal with simultaneous cyber and physical disruptions? That's how, if I want to break into an organization, I do it. I do it in a combination, not just hitting your firewall. I do it by sending a few people in with boxes on their shoulders and brown overalls to deliver into the back of your building where your security is weak, and at the same time I mount a series of phishing attacks. So your supply chain is a key area of weakness. Cyber resilience for most organizations today, in summary, ladies and gentlemen, is really where it's at. If you're thinking just about defense, technical defense, or separately business continuity management, you're operating what a boxer would think of as having a glass chin. A glass chin is something that when it gets punched, the guy goes over. He is not able to be resilient and get himself up after it or cope with the punch. Cyber resilience is the approach which ensures that however pervasive the threat of cyber attack is, however broad, multi-format, complicated it is, wherever it comes from, you're able to deal with it. And a cyber resilience strategy should be part of any board's armory of risk management responses. Use ISO 27001 and ISO 22301 to help you do it, ladies and gentlemen. That's where I plan to finish, so I'll finish. Questions?
Alan, thank you very much. A comprehensive presentation to end the day's briefs. Very, very grateful. It's question time now, and I just want to take a straw poll. How many of you got questions for any of the speakers? Okay. Matt, can you...
Thank you very much. It's Ali, University of Northampton. I'm asking you, thank you very much about this leaflet, and there is a certification at the end about the training course. And can you just clarify what does it mean by these 3 days, and whoever get this certification, he's going to lead, plan, and implement. Can I have more about that, please?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so implementing ISO 27001, I think you're probably looking at something which talks about how you would implement a management system that meets those requirements. So it takes you through the entire process of planning, implementing, how to deal with management, and all of those things to the point where you've got a management system which meets the requirements of ISO 27001 as a standard.
Next. So you're all well briefed. You all understand the challenges. You know you have to... Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Hi. You said about you'd have men come into the building. What would you be having them aim to do?
What I'd be having them aim to do is to get onto the half a dozen in any large organization. I'd expect to find workstations or laptops that don't have screensavers on. I'd expect to find a number of workstations or laptops that I can put a USB stick into and upload some data from. I'd be looking for those kind of opportunities.
Okay, thank you.